All right, everybody, welcome to the podcast. So this week we had hoped to have Dr. K right over there, but unfortunately his flight arrived late, so you've got me. I had intended...
And me.
And Henry. I'd intended to share a lot of this in a week or two when it was more developed, but I'll give you what I have now. So ever since the conversation with Dr. K and a number of other ones that we'd had, I'd gotten interested in men's issues as well as mental health and had done some reading on archetypes, including some of Joseph Campbell's work. He's the guy, Hero with 1,000 Faces, who does the hero's journey. And so I watched a ton of stuff on that and got fed these rabbit holes of men's issues, archetypes, Jungian stuff. And so here's some interesting things that I took. One of them comes from a guy named Chris Bale. And he's got this idea that when, in our society, we all kind of know that female sexuality is aggressively controlled, patrolled, deemed shameful. We slut shame. We have words for the ways in which we alienate women from their sexuality. We don't have those words for men. And his contention, which I agree with, is that men are at least as much distanced from their sexuality. The difference being that with men, male sexuality is deemed unsafe, dangerous. And if you think back, if you are a guy, to growing up, he points out that little boys have their hands down their pants, as do little girls, some of the time. They touch all the different parts of their bodies. They touch their head, they touch their knees, they touch their elbows, and they touch their pee-pee, right? It can act for little kids as a sense of comfort to explore and know one's body, but at some point, they're told don't do that anymore. Of course, the same thing occurs with little girls. What is different in young men is that when you hit puberty and you start to get erections and you can't control them, there is a broadcast that goes out. I don't know that anybody ever sat me down and told me this, but I picked it up definitely, that you do not want to be seen with an erection through your sweatpants or whatever the heck you're wearing in junior high school. And there's no class on it, but it's not like you learn to control your level of arousal and be with it and allow it to move through you. What you learn are the old cliches of think of baseball. And I guess I heard that once. And literally I would watch the baseball diamond if I ever had an erection in middle school. And batter hits it to shortstop to second, turns two. I swear to God, dude. I swear to God.
Was it a double play that got you out of the boners?
Double plays. It was always complex plays. It was he's going to go back to second. He's tagging up. And what that is a distraction. And concretely, you learn to disconnect from whatever it was that made that happen in you, right? So it could have been a breeze. Heck, it's middle school. It could have been a thought or a person. But you learn to, guys are probably, you had a million tricks in order to handle this, but you learn to disconnect from that experience, which is occurring in and around your groin area. And the only time that you are able to reconnect with that is during sex. And then for a lot of men, he points out that it's a very localized area of pleasure. Whereas women, and not all women struggle with this as well for similar reasons, can have orgasms that seem to roll through their whole body, right? For men, it's this localized tension release that occurs. And he contends that is not how it has to be, which a lot of people talk about, and that it is in fact not healthy and has a number of adverse effects other than simply not having full body orgasms. That the disconnection from your groin leads to, let's just say, for example, when I think back to the early days of Charisma on Command, the way that I would feel and men would feel around women, they would feel this attraction towards them, but they would come up out of their bodies into their heads, and it would be, what do I say? What do I say? What do I say? What do I say? And the way that we dealt with that was by here's some of the things that you can say. Here's some of the things that your mind can grab onto so that you can have this interaction go well, and hopefully you can stay so freaked out for the first interaction, but then you get a second date where you can calm down a little bit and you can be with her. And sometimes you didn't calm down till after several dates and you're in a relationship, and it's only after 6 months that you meet one another in a relationship because you finally have settled down enough that you're not just in your head thinking what would be nice for me to say or what will make her like me, but you are being yourself. And then you get relationship conflict because now you're not being this version of you that is constantly checking what would be the best thing to say, but both parties are being who they are. And then there's conflict because they weren't that person at the beginning of the relationship. Additionally, there's I believe it's traditional Indian medicine, there's this idea of chakras. And you don't have to believe in chakras or any of that, but the basic idea is that for these 7 points, they're associated with different energies or feelings you can think of that you might have in your body. Some of them that I know you won't disagree with, no matter your level of spirituality, is that your heart chakra is where a lot of the love is felt. And so when you're in a relationship, it can feel like your heart is expanding, or when you see something that it can feel that it's pulled towards your heart. Your throat chakra can feel like self-expression. When you're choked up and you can't speak, that is not something that you necessarily feel at the crown chakra. It's something that you feel in your throat. And so the ones that are associated with your groin area, there's 2 of them. The lowest one is called the root chakra. It's at the base of your spine, traditionally associated with the bladder, the anus, all those kinds of things. And it has to do with safety. Now, if you think of what happens with animals, children, or even adults when they feel really unsafe, maybe in wartime, is they lose control of their bowels and bladder. They pee themselves, or they poop themselves, or they, are really constricted down there. The second one up from that is your sacral chakra, which has to do with your reproductive organs, your prostate, and is the seat of pleasure, right? So one of the things that gay men often say is that they are capable of having more intense orgasms because they get prostate stimulation because they're having anal sex, versus straight men, most of whom are very, very afraid of anything going in their butt or any sort of stimulation to their prostate, which is just a place of like tremendous potential pleasure. So you're cut off if this area is a no-go for you, meaning you've learned to disconnect from it. It's not okay to feel, which is sort of what's trained over the course of your life. And certainly it would be, can you imagine if there was an adult man with his hand down his pants?
Yeah.
Not even touch it, but just like in the same way that somebody might go like this, just not aggressively, just
we have laws against
existing.
that.
Yeah. And so this is, I was going to make a different point, but I'll say this. He raises the issue of like, we're fine with somebody touching their elbow. We're fine with somebody touching their head. Like, what if an adult, without aggressing on anybody or masturbating or anything, had their hand down their pants and they were seen? Their sexuality wasn't coming out and hurting anyone, but the mere fact of connection with that would feel creepy, wrong, aggressive, because we don't have the sense that any adult, but men especially, I think, can have contact with their sexual experience and be safe for other people. That you could do that and maybe be really attracted to someone on the other end of the room, but not impose that experience on them, right? That you could contain that in your own being. And I don't know how he'd like to organize society, but it raises a really interesting question, which is when, as an adult, you go and you speak to someone that you're attracted to, from where are you speaking? And it's not what he would suggest, that it's like, are you speaking from your groin, your stomach, your heart, your throat, and your head, your whole body? Or are you from here up? And I think almost everybody in almost every interaction is from here up. You're interacting with my thoughts, my neuroses, my fears, my ideas about myself, but you're not getting a fully embodied experience of me, which is safely in contact with my own sexual attraction that I might feel when I'm approaching someone.
So does this guy have any, does he say touch your nuts more, or?
Well, so yes, that's what he says.
Okay.
So he's not saying do it in public, but just to complete the thought is, can the idea that you could be safe while feeling sexual charge is not common. And then he says, okay, so if you can't feel sexual charge, that's your life force. That's your connection to creativity. This isn't just going to influence your sex life negatively. This is going to negatively impact you knowing who you are at a deep level. You're going to constantly be thinking about who you are. What would be the best thing for me to say? What would be the best career for me to have? And these are going to be questions, but they're not going to spontaneously emerge from the depths of your being, which requires embodied feeling. And these words might not mean a lot to other people, but in my experience, this is very true. The things that surge up from within you about what you want in your life, what career would be best, if this relationship is right for you, when it feels like they're just coming from you playing out scenarios in your head and imaginings, those to me have been fragile and less trustworthy, even though you're running the pros and cons list and it can feel very rational.
Yeah.
The disconnection of like, what comes up is like, I want to be an astronaut, or, like there's some deep wisdom when you can connect with your body about how you should move in the world, who is right for you, what is right for you, what is not right for you. So you lose that connection, you lose your creativity, you lose all these things. So how do you reconnect? He does like just touch yourself. And the way that most men touch themselves is they masturbate, they get an intense experience, and it's released. And it's like almost the goal is there's this charge that is felt in this area, and I need to empty that. Like as the charge builds up, it feels overwhelming so quickly because there's such a level of disconnection that you get men who compulsively masturbate or, rush to finish in sex, or the whole point of sex is about the finishing part of sex. And the preceding thing is like, can't just be ridden and experienced and be a pleasurable feeling that sort of moves through your body. Sex becomes this aggressive, hard act that is about its climactic moment, which is not just how men are, but is a way of culturally that we've sort of been culturally conditioned to be. And that's why I thought that's interesting. His solutions are broadly, you could do Qigong, you could do things to connect you with your body, but it is bringing your attention and sometimes your hands, because your hands can direct attention. I mean, you can think of what it feels like in your hand, or you can touch your hand, and it brings a different level of awareness to that. So in the privacy of your own home, touching yourself without masturbating is one of the things he suggests. He also suggests semen retention, which is like similar to the NoFap thing, which I've not really been into NoFap in the past. No, it's the ways that I've heard NoFap described are generally, I lack motivation, I lack the desire to talk to women, I'm living purely in a world of fantasy, and I need to not do any of that in order to reconnect with the world. And that wasn't my issue, so I didn't connect with that as much. But his discussion about you're losing contact with the depth of your creativity, you're losing that speaks to me more. So I find it interesting, and I'll test it out for a period of time.
I certainly feel the same with the disconnection and learning. I mean, the baseball diamond, I've got, think of dead people. Like,
is that what you do?
It's just immediately gone. But yeah.
And then I just immediately am turned on.
And then I can't help myself. I just walk around 8th grade just thinking of dead people with a giant erection. I felt the same when you told me this, that women are also disconnected.
Yes.
Everyone's sort of disconnected with that part of their body. I'm glad we got to get back to touching our nuts, dude.
Yeah. And the other thing that I thought of, which is, okay, so you have all of these people with men and women with a lack of groin consciousness, lack of groin awareness, except for these particular times in their life. And what I see, when you think about safety, it occurred to me in a breath work that most people are deeply unsafe in the world. They feel deeply, deeply unsafe. If you take one relationship away from them, somebody dumps them, somebody doesn't want to be their friend, somebody dies, they don't just grieve, they would absolutely panic. And there is a difference, like between, and I think you might have felt both of this when Lady died, which is there's the grief on the one hand, there's the loss, but there's also the panic about who am I that is raised. And if you don't have contact with your butt, your sacral chakra, and what comes from that, he says, is like, because this is your lowest energy center, it's what connects you to your legs, your feet, and therefore the ground. And if you've heard discussions of grounding or this feeling of being supported by the earth, I can tell you that since I've felt more of it in the last couple of months, it is the ultimate provider of safety. Is you feel the stability of the ground beneath you. But if you don't, and you're not really conscious of your legs, and you're not really conscious of your groin, and you're mostly just conscious of your thoughts, there's a felt sensation of like, I'm just blowing in the wind up here. Like I am not safe in this place.
Yeah, and you got to come up with all these mind games to get safe.
Yes. And
rather than the felt sense of like, I'm safe, and then the thoughts kind of disappear about something.
Yes.
Or whatever the anxiety is coming up in here.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so I think of, friends, family, people that I know, and and myself to a degree, and the level of unsafety is just so high. And then, in traditional thought, while you can of course work on different energy centers, it's called the root chakra. It's the base for a reason, because if you're not safe, how are you really going to get honest self-expression? Like if you don't feel safe, imagine somebody's got a gun to your head and tell me the truth about X, Y, or Z.
I'll tell you anything about X, Y, Z.
You'll say anything. Okay. Feel into your heart, but you're not safe in the like those things can't really be done. And so the foundational nature of your groin, the base of your spine, grounding, all of that stuff, it struck me as a pretty missing piece for a lot of people who are trying to build on a unsturdy foundation that is not safe in the world. And the way that they get safe is they attach themselves, and I relate, to other people. And then they convince themselves that their safety comes through that attachment with this other person. But all that needs to be revealed to expose the level of unsafety is what would happen if that person left them in one way or another. And I've seen it, I've experienced it, I've been this panic. Legitimate, the fear would be, and then realized, and then how would they manage that panic? I've seen this in myself and other
visualize what it looks like for you to panic.
Yeah.
It's all up in the head too.
Yeah.
It's like just head games of trying to figure out how to get back to safety.
Frantic action, convincing yourself that things that aren't true are true, whatever is required to get back to a sense of safety. Unfortunately, people don't go looking at their root chakra.
They're not doing Qigong.
They're not doing Qigong. They go and attach themselves to something else. And oftentimes they attach themselves to something else that is as unsafe as they feel, someone else who matches their level of unsafety, because that's the only type of person that is going to tolerate their level of anxiety. And then they become a perfect anxiety match for one another, right? So that's why you get the avoidant and the anxious person who are together, because at some level they feel equally unsafe in relationships, but they form this bond with one another.
Yeah.
So I thought that was just interesting stuff. Anything else you want to?
No, just that I can definitely relate to being disconnected from that part of my body, and then can remember the moments of growing up where they're just like, get your hands out of your pants. I'm just like, oh shit. Okay. Yeah. Pretty young too. And
really young.
Yeah.
Really young. I don't know what's to be done, but you could imagine, what if this wasn't bad? All right, well, what if you stepped outside of your cultural, not you or listener, outside of the cultural assumptions that you have?
I always think of like ancient Greece for these situations. It's like, what were they doing back then? Or like the Egyptians. It's just like a different view on sexuality and masculinity and femininity. And it's culturally new to say, I mean, these people were in cloths. Like,
I mean, certainly for a long time in human history, even before Egypt and Greece, there was,
And while you were talking, it reminded me of that chimp documentary, because of like all the social dynamics that go through chimps, and like they groom each other's nuts, and it's like they don't care. It's like nothing until the moment of like the sexual arousal, and like don't learn everything. It's not a ton you could pull out of the chimp documentary, but like the one was like, it's just another area that you groom, for the most part. And then second, like other areas are more important. Like if the one chimp gets to groom the higher status alpha near the face, and he looks at him, it's like the sunshine. He's like formed a new alliance. And so like, do you remember the one chimp was trying to groom the guy, and he just had his back to him the whole time. And then he was like, "Are you going to do me?" He's like, "No." And he just left.
Yeah, I remember.
Which is just interesting, because I think that occurs at a smaller degree with humans. It's like gives you insight to. So
we should be picking the lice off of each other's.
Yeah, if you're going to give compliments to someone, he goes, "Oh, thanks, appreciate that," and he bounces. He's like, "Yeah, you guys, you form rapport or friendship right there, friend."
I don't know if this is connected, but it just occurred to me for some reason that there's also this level of, you think of the parts of the body that people are most disgusted by. It's the butt, maybe Gen Z changes that. But it's the groin, the butt, and the feet are often the things that disgust people the most. And it's like, wow, it's those low to the ground things. It's the most animal parts of us that we cannot, like, your feet are going to touch the ground. They're going to get dirty. Like, your butt is the part that you're eliminating from. And there is this, disgust that people feel around that. Not that they need to start doing all kinds of crazy sex acts, but that could be examined, I think, and lead to some fruitful reconnection.
Yeah, for sure.
So I also watched Joseph Campbell's, what was his name? Pat Moyer, conversation with Pat Moyer. And he got a couple of quotes. I'll just read you some of them that I liked.
Who's Pat Moyer?
He's a guy from PBS, just
an interviewer?
They did 6 hours of interview.
Wow.
Before he died. Joseph Campbell, Hero with 1,000 Faces, and The Hero's Journey. So one of the quotes that I think he cited Jung here, but which is, one of the main functions of organized religion is to protect people against a direct experience of God. I thought that was appropriate because he looks at myths and the religions that surround them and how, depending on the culture, there is a direct experience of nature as God or of some sort of relationship with God. And then as you get into the progress of the West, you see this mediated experience with God through the priest class, through something else. And he talks about, for instance, the Native Americans saw God everywhere. God was in the bones of the buffalo. God was in the river. God was in the sky. And it was impossible not to.
It was also an intimate experience that wasn't transacted through a third party.
It was a direct experience of it every day. Versus churches, you got to come here, you got to go through this guy, and through him, he will give you the Eucharist, and that will be your conduit to it, which I thought was...
Well, I guess you could also get in prayer intimately, but that's an interesting thing that there's a decider of the words.
And if I look at the things that I want to actually bring into my life and the things that I want to leave, because I lumped them all together, I think prayer is awesome. I think prayer is fantastic. Some sort of, whoever you think you're talking to, your higher self, just yourself, God, that's beautiful. And the things that I want to get away from are the mediated ideologies, and it's not just the ritual, because I think that there's value to ritual, but it's somebody else telling me
what to think.
What
about suggestions? How do you feel about suggestions?
Oh, I love suggestions.
I mean, this gets back to the problem. You have a problem with authority, God being told.
No, I love suggestions. And I spent a lot of time getting suggestions from Joseph Campbell and other people.
Gotcha.
That was not my experience of religion. It was not a suggestion. This is open to this, do this, sit, stand. There was no suggestions. Stand if you feel, sing if you feel. It was do as I say the whole time.
Yeah.
Joseph Campbell says this, they're talking about meditation. He says, all of life is a meditation. Most people spend it meditating on where their money's coming from and where it's going to go, but that's a form of meditation, which I thought was interesting.
Yeah.
Oh man. And what is the implication of that when your life is spent meditating on the things that you spend it meditating on?
Yeah.
He talked about a number of different traditions. One was the Japanese Shinto religion, which that they have these mirrors in the Shinto temples that are supposed to reflect the deity. And of course the mirror reflects you. So there's this idea in a number of different things that the divine is inside of the person, and it's in coming to connect with the divine inside of you, and therefore the divine in others and the divine and everything, which I like that a lot. The Oracle at Delphi has...
It seems narcissistic at first, but I can see how if the intention is to look past oneself through, how it could be. I mean, you get a narcissist in there, he's like showing off his muscles.
Yeah. And Joseph Campbell is, of course, with all of these reading into, and this might not be how this is.
But
gotcha. The idea that he reads is that the world is a mirror. And this is just an intense... The world reflects you back to you, you know, and if you see divinity in there, you need to see divinity being reflected back at you, so that the mirror was a really important thing.
This guy was deep.
Temples. Joseph Campbell's great, yeah. Talks about the Oracle at Delphi, which is the Greek religion. If you remember 300, he has to go to the Oracle before he is able to take his 300 soldiers. And outside of the entrance, I don't know if it was a cave or a thing, it's had in Greek, know thyself was... amongst two others, I don't remember them, but know thyself was the primary commandment. And you see that repeated, which is this idea of the mirror, know thyself, right? The Oracle at Delphi telling you, instructing you to self-reflection, which I thought was very interesting. And that, of course, being, as I talked about earlier, knowing yourself beyond the stories you tell. There's all these exercises that I've done in the past, which is like, describe yourself without using any be verbs. Describe yourself without learning any do verbs. So depending on where you are in personal development, you might be like, I'm a good friend, I'm a brother, I am Charlie, I'm whatever. And they'll be like, no, that's not what you are. You are what you do. So you have to say, I pick my friends up at the airport. You can't claim that you're a good friend. You have to do the good friend things. And that focuses you on behaviors, which is, okay, fine, valuable for a time, but it doesn't like the M's. And then other ones will tell you, who are you, right? Focus on what you are. And I think that the injunction and the mirror is some of the most powerful. Pay attention. What do you see, feel? Who are you? It's Mufasa in the sky. Remember who you are. It's type lessons, which I connect with. And then I did some archetype stuff. Did some research, did some reading. And if you watched previous episodes, there was one, King, Warrior, Magician, Lover, was a book that talks about some of the 4 big male archetypes. I did a lot of work with the King, which I'm not going to talk about now because I feel like it's still in flux, and I don't want to. I'd rather just talk about it in a few weeks. But I can tell you what I learned with warrior stuff. So when I looked, I did a breath work. I was like, what's going on with my warrior? I saw a Viking berserker.
Nice, dude.
Skarsgård from the Northmen, and had this sense that I have had a reactive warrior pattern, which can be bloodthirsty. You don't hurt me, I hurt you.
You don't have a knight ready at stand with armor and a sword waiting for his command. You have a
berserker.
A berserker who is not wearing clothes. He has an axe and there's blood on his face and he's just there.
If you engage my reactivity, I will look to wound back. That level. And what has my warrior been doing? Because I don't go to the gym and bust my ass. I don't have that Ronin drive that I see on Instagram. What's going on with mine? And I feel that my warrior has been doing some of that, but also has been, and this is where the King comes in, I'll talk in the future, fighting God and fighting reality. Wishing things weren't the way they were, trying to make now be the future, trying to make now be the past, just like in combat with the way things are. And that drive looked like, I don't want to be in consulting. I'm going to go start a business. And there was, of course, value to this in my life. So I'm going to go start Charisma on Command. And I don't like my dating. Like, I don't like the way things are. But if you sick a berserker on never liking the way things are, that to me has gotten exhausting in my life. It's just that's like it's not okay type feeling. So
is his energy getting repetitive? Is it waning? Is it just not serving you, but he's still berserking?
It's just where he's been. I'm like, why? How come you don't show up in the gym?
Yeah, no, he does not like lifting.
He doesn't give a shit. He's like, dude, I'm fucking
killing the world.
And so I was feeling into what feels like a more mature way for that. And for some reason, I was called towards samurai culture. I don't know why. I don't know a ton about it. And then I started reading up on samurai culture a little bit. So I read a book called Bushido, which was written at the turn of the 20th century, which is 1899, by a guy from Japan. And there were some things that stood out to me, which is that in his explanation of samurai and Bushido culture, which is sort of the moral code that informed that era of several hundred years of samurai culture at its best, the idea that ethical, embodied knowledge over intellectual book smarts, which has been very opposite for me. I've been like very book smart in my whole life, but probably very much lacking in street smarts. And my ethical knowledge is heady instead of heartfelt and acted out. So like I give to charity because I did the math and you're supposed to.
How does it look for the samurai? Is he like, notches on the sword that he doesn't speak about that are like kills or wins or something? Like what is it? How is it emblematic in the book that he has a felt?
That his, that he sort of moves around. His word is his bond. He doesn't need to sign a piece of paper. When he speaks, it's as good as done. That I think another thing, and you see both sides of it, is the idea of honor. And so he describes both. There's like honor at its best, which is what I really want and admire, which is a deep trust in one's own internally generated code. And then there's honor, which I would describe as not what I want, but I see that in some Asian cultures, which is honor as your reputation amongst others.
Yeah.
And so he describes two stories of samurai, which are almost the opposite of one another. And so here's the first story. The first story is, and these are apocryphal, they may not have really happened, but they were tales that people would tell, that a samurai, his master is killed by this guy, and so he trains to be able to kill him in return. And he does what he needs to do, gets to him, knocks him over, is about to kill him, and the guy who he's about to kill spits at his face. And at that moment, he sheathes his sword and walks away. And the question is, why did he do that? And the answer is that if he had killed him in that moment, it would have been in anger. And it wouldn't have been justice, is the sense, is that the samurai is not there as a berserker to hurt and exchange violence for violence. That there is which I'm reading into this a little bit, there is a way to be lovingly violent, to understand that in this world, some things are at odds with one another. And you do not have to hate or want to hurt something in order to put an end to it. And I think that while I'm not engaged in war, I've like, oh, this is why I struggle with firing people, because I don't know how to be lovingly decisive and cut things off and say, this is not right. I'm going to act swiftly, with clarity and love, without any desire in my heart to hurt at all. And the reason I don't fire is because like, I must want to hurt. I must be hurting you. Why would I do this to you? I haven't known how to manage that. So I just try to make everything a win-win, everything copacetic, everything has to work that way. And I think that there is value to the warrior energy of some things cannot coexist in this reality in this way. It does not mean I hate them. It does not mean, it means that I know what needs to be done in order to live by my code. And I found that powerful.
That story also affects me in a different way. I found that he could be, that the way he walked away after getting spit on his face is not honorable either. That he could honorably kill him in that moment is just, now he's just trying to be perceived as honorable because the guy spit in his face. That's why he walked away. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it still could just be perceived as the other.
Only he knows.
Only he knows is what I'm saying.
Only he knows.
Yes.
So if he did it to make a show so that other people thought, again,
tell the story.
To tell the story, you're totally right.
Got it.
And so it's the whole thing of the samurai, not the whole thing, but a big part was self-possession. So it was, are you in, I hesitate to say control, but they were about control of emotions, which I think can go deeper than simply disconnecting. So they describe one of the things that was really amazing about samurai that they looked on and honored was when in the face of mortal danger, they could compose a poem. And so there was a guy who was pursuing one and he was about to land him, and he recited a couplet to him of, now the days are short and you are about to fall.
Sweet.
And the guy responded, if but I'd seen how short they were before.
Sick.
And he doesn't kill him. And he just, he bowed because
the true samurai honor.
True samurai, it's, game recognized game type situation. So I don't know that I get all that, but it was this idea of self-possession, of even in the moments where you come up and freak out and give into your freaky, total instinctive, to have your capacities with you, to remain grounded, to make friends with death in a way that you were able to live up until you're gone.
Yeah, that's also the imagery that I get from Western culture's idea of samurais, which is like they also draw sweeping motions and calligraphy. And then they don't sheath their sword unless they're absolutely going to use it, and it's quick and decisive.
That's another
There's
big
not
piece.
battling with ja. I mean, there is in some of the movies, but it's like ninja. It's decisive.
decisive is, I think, a powerful. It's not wanton violence. It's not to make a show of things. It's to end things. At least this is what I want to think. I'm not even interested in commenting on what was or wasn't true about samurai. It's the archetype is what I find valuable.
Yeah.
The story and how it resonates with me. So if none of this is true, it actually doesn't change how I feel, which is I feel connection. Like that would be a good energy for me to move into, which is loving decisiveness to cut things off.
An ability to be, the loving part is big, to recite a poem while you're doing it.
Yes. And then the story of bad honor, or in my opinion, bad honor, is samurai is walking with a peasant, and the peasant comments that a fly has landed on his armor, and he turns around and cuts him in half.
He cuts the peasant in half?
Yeah. And so there was both of these there's stories of these rageful, totally about what other people think of me, do not besmirch my name. And then there's other stories of people who get their name is drugged through the mud and they do not care. They know who they are. And I thought that it was interesting that both of them are these tales that were told about samurai. Both may have been true of different individuals, obviously, but for me, it's clear which one
you are. You're going to kill a guy.
Which one I'd like to be.
There's a fly on your shoulder.
So that was a samurai. I like the own code of honor thing. And then, yeah, we could talk about some of the other stuff. The last two things, which is about knowing what you want, imagining that you want somebody else's life, was Nikola Jokic saying...
winning the finals.
Winning the finals, being the best player for 3 years in a row, should have gotten MVP again. When you ask me, what do you want to do? I want to play NBA. I want to be in the basketball. I want to be MVP. He's like that guy.
So online they were playing back-to-back like slides of Kevin Durant being anything is possible as he wins the NBA finals, dream come true, he's screaming, and then they interview Jokic, and it's just like he got out of the grocery store and they asked him what he picked up. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, I got, carrots and just, it's a job, but
that's what he says.
I'll go home now.
So he says, he's talking about it and they ask him and he says, well, nobody likes their job.
Yeah.
Which I thought was all he wants to do is go home and ride on his horses. I think he probably likes basketball, but feels it as a job. And that struck me as like, oh my gosh. Of course, external circumstances have some importance, but this guy is living one of the most common dreams of young boys on the planet and would probably prefer to not have to, would like to just ride his horses. And the thing that he wants to do does not require anywhere near as much money or fame or status as he has. Like he's got his horse farm. That was achievable with far less than the NBA money that he had. And I found that instructive and interesting, and to remind myself of just when you're surrounded by people that want to be important, want to make a difference, want to do that kind of stuff. And that's what you see, I think, primarily produced by content creators is people that want to be seen. It's very useful to see someone at the absolute top of the mountain just go.
He's got his priorities in order. He loves his family, and he wants to go home and hang out with his horses.
Cool. And it's like, oh my gosh.
He plays video games. I think it greatly serves him on the court too, because when you treat it like a job, it's something that you go and do. Mm-hmm. And he never is the type of guy who's too high or too low. And so he's always got the most efficient shot in the last 10 years is a Nikola Jokic post up, which is just like, how is that possible? He's shooting hook shots. This shouldn't be that easy. How does he have such great touch? He's not high or low. He's doing his job at like you might clear email. It's just routine, and the guy can bump you and he can say bad things to you. You can have a bad day, but you're just going through the motion. And I felt that and winning at getting the highest honor is the same as when you lose a game. It's not the biggest deal. He's still going to go home with his family and race horses.
Was Tim Duncan like that? Was he even?
Yeah, Tim Duncan was similar.
Because there are maniacs as well, and I would say there are more maniacs that achieve at the highest levels than there are.
Yeah, Kobe Bryant, Michael Jordan. Every story is them making up stuff that someone besmirched their name.
Yes,
bad honor, and then they have to go destroy them.
Yeah,
and then you find out years later he made it up in his head and then told all the papers, which is like.
What I take is, which one do I want to be? And it's, I don't want to run around with a chip on my shoulder trying to prove something. I want to figure out my horses and figure out work that is meaningful to me and do that and not just strive for the biggest thing. And the other one was that Submersible that it might have just exploded, the Titan that went underwater. It might, but there was
all
a time,
the news says is it's imploded, but it raises a deep philosophical question.
There was a time when I was going, oh my God, there are 5 people under 2 miles of water trapped with each other in a tiny little space. And that grabbed me for some reason. And one of the things that I thought was that Zen parable of these people have had incredible lives. There's a billionaire son in that thing, tragically. And not tragic because he's a billionaire son, because he's a person. But the idea of, do you want to be a billionaire son? And then finding out that, do you want to go here? And then finding out that means potentially spending your last 3-4 days with low oxygen, freezing in a tube, just reminded me of the Zen parable of we will see. Do you know that one?
No.
It's the boy gets a horse. Everyone in the village claps. So this is amazing. They go to the village elder. The village elder says, "Oh, we'll see." The horse runs away. Everyone says, "Oh, I'm so sorry." The village elder says, "I don't know. We'll see." Horse comes back. It brings a whole stable of things. Village elder, "Oh, it's amazing."
So we'll see.
We'll see. The boy falls off the horse, breaks his arm. We'll see. There's a war. The boy doesn't have to go to the war because he's got a broken arm. Everyone says, "How good for you." And the village elder says, "We'll see." Just that you don't know what life is, a totality. You can enjoy moments of it, but when you start thinking that you understand it, that you've got it, that you know what is good and what is bad, you've lost it a little bit. And I am trying, this is with some of the other stuff, to open up to sincerely allowing in. And I've had a relatively easy life to do this with, so I'm not recommending it for other people at this point, but the actual idea that everything is happening for me and that even the things that I don't want are happening for me. And that would have to include, were it me, being in a submersible for 5 days underground in order to, I don't know. I wouldn't know why this was happening for me, I'll be honest, if that were my lot. And there's been times in my life where I go, how could this possibly be good for me or what I want? And I can't say that I've yet seen through to all of them.
No, I haven't found the enlightenment being in that situation.
What I can say is that I've seen a pattern of pain. I'll talk about in a few weeks. As the ultimate teacher, pain is the ultimate teacher. And also, as the more pain that I've experienced, the more capable of love that I've become, I find. And I'm not saying that that's what anybody in hard experiences. I'm not trying to tell you that I need to foist that upon you or that you need to find the silver lining in anything. But that has just been true in my life without even forcing it to be true. Those lessons continue to come to me as I let pain in, that I find more compassion, more love, and more pain. And more depth of feeling.
Yeah, and I think in our culture, it's looked at as bad to be in pain, emotionally speaking. No pain, no gain's fine for the gym. Mm-hmm. But emotionally speaking, you're not supposed to show people you're in pain. You're supposed to actively avoid it, go to your phone, disconnect from the body parts. Mm-hmm. I'm not saying there's pain going on there, but there's a large
I think there is
portion
with that stuff. That's the part of the implication of that guy's work, is that you will find aches, pains, physical sensations of loss and grief in those disconnected body parts.
Yeah.
So that's one of the ways in which I've, not necessarily just with that, but opened up to body pain, which is connected to emotional pain oftentimes.
Yeah.
And the opening to it doesn't mean just, acknowledging it. It means really letting it be without trying to fix, heal it, and create, like, the bigger the pain, the more space you have to experience it. And I have become, I feel like, more spacious over time in my capacity. So that was, I don't know what else to say about the Submersible. It's
we played Would You Rather for a long time after it, which is like, would you rather be a billionaire, but at the end of your life, you have to die in a submersible? Mm-hmm. I said, how old am I?
Yeah.
Because at 19, that poor child.
Yeah.
At 85, it's like,
just lay down.
Just tell everyone you're going to die.
Yeah. Well, I don't have much more to say about that. I didn't know if there's anything else you wanted to touch on.
would you rather? No, I don't have anything.
Cool. Like I said, a lot of this stuff was I pulled together just last minute, so I hope that you found it interesting. We will have, hopefully, we'll have Destiny, who still is scheduled, and then Nomad Capitalist, who is still scheduled, and potentially Dr. K. We'll see if we get that in the next 3 podcasts. So I hope you guys enjoyed this one. We'll see you with guests the next time. Peace.
Peace.